The afternoon sun burned over Dallas, Texas, casting long shadows across the streets when a breaking headline exploded across every news channel. School safety crisis deepens teacher-police clash, recorded at Riverside High. Parents froze mid-step. Students scrolling through their phones stopped breathing for a moment. The footage had gone viral within minutes. The video, shaky, captured from a student's smartphone, showed chaos outside Riverside High School. Dozens of students screamed and ran in different directions. Teachers stood in a tense line near the school gates. And just a few feet away, police officers gripped their batons, their voices sharp through megaphones. But what shook the city wasn't just the confrontation itself. It was why it happened. The narrator's voice deepens, pulling the viewer in. When parents send their kids to school, they expect them to be safe. But what happens when the very people meant to protect them, teachers and police, stand on opposite sides of the battlefield? The story began 3 weeks earlier. So, inside Riverside High, the hallways buzzed with the usual Monday morning chaos, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking on polished floors, students shouting across the corridors. Emily Carter, a beloved English teacher known for her fiery spirit, leaned against the doorway of her classroom, watching her students settle in. Her voice was calm, but there was tension in her eyes, as though she sensed a storm brewing long before anyone else did. That morning, a troubling email had landed in her inbox from Principal Michael Turner. It announced new safety measures following a string of violent incidents in schools across Texas. The plan included random student searches, increased police patrols, and mandatory reporting of suspicious behavior. Emily frowned at her screen, muttering under her breath. Suspicious behavior? Do they even realize what this means for our kids? At lunch, she joined Lena Roberts, her close friend and fellow teacher, in the quiet corner of the staff room. Lena glanced at Emily's pale face and knew something was wrong. "Don't tell me," Lena whispered. "You read the email?" Emily nodded. "They're turning this place into a prison, Lena. Do you know what that will do to our students, especially the ones already struggling?" Lena hesitated, lowering her voice even further. "Emily, I get it, but parents are scared. Last week, a school in Fort Worth had a police lockdown after a kid brought a knife. Everyone's panicking." Emily clenched her jaw. "I'm not against safety, but this isn't safety, this is control." What Emily didn't know yet was that her quiet frustration would soon spiral into a full-blown confrontation, one that would put her students, and the entire school at the center of a national debate. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Hayes from the Dallas Police Department was assigned to Riverside High as part of the district's new safety initiative. For him, it was just another assignment, until one incident changed everything. In the corner of the cafeteria, Jake Miller, a troubled 16-year-old, sat alone, scribbling furiously in his notebook. He had always been the quiet kid, the one teachers whispered about, the one who avoided eye contact. But that day, something about him drew Officer Hayes' attention. The officer's instincts told him something was off. And when a misunderstanding escalated into a confrontation between Jake and school security, Emily stepped in. That decision would set off a chain reaction that no one could stop. Because within days, what began as a simple disagreement over school policy would ignite a citywide storm, drawing police, teachers, parents, and the media into a battle over who truly protects our children. And at the center of it all stood Emily Carter. The camera slowly zooms in on her as the narrator whispers, "Sometimes protecting your students means standing against the very system sworn to protect them." The tension builds. The chaos brews. The stage is set. The following week at Riverside High School felt different. Tension hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and unspoken. Teachers whispered in the hallways. Students walked in small groups, their voices low. And through it all, Emily Carter could feel the shift in the atmosphere, a quiet unease that grew with each passing day. The new school safety policy had officially gone into effect. Every morning, uniformed police officers now stood at the gates, scanning the students as they entered. Random bag checks were being conducted, and several students had already been pulled aside for questioning. For some parents, this brought relief, but for others, and for many teachers, it felt like a slow erosion of trust. In the teacher's lounge, the staff gathered around the table, coffee cups in hand, staring down at the printed memo from Principal Michael Turner. Emily slammed the paper onto the table. "Listen to this," she said, her voice trembling with frustration. "From today forward, any behavior deemed suspicious must be reported to security immediately. No exceptions." Lena Roberts sighed deeply. Suspicious behavior? That's so vague it could mean anything. It does mean anything, Emily shot back. A kid wearing a hoodie, a girl whispering in the hallway, a student skipping lunch. Do you realize how this will make them feel? Like criminals. Across the room, Mr. James Parker, the history teacher, spoke up. Emily, I get where you're coming from, but look around. We've had 3 fights in the last month. Parents are demanding action. If the district doesn't do something, the school board will. Emily's jaw tightened. There's a difference between keeping kids safe and treating them like suspects. We're supposed to teach them, James, not police them. Before anyone could respond, the door opened and Officer Daniel Hayes stepped in, scanning the room. His uniform seemed to darken the already tense atmosphere. "Morning, everyone," he said calmly. "Just a heads up, the new protocol requires us to conduct random searches in classrooms today. It's not personal, it's about safety." Emily locked eyes with him, her voice sharp but steady. "Safety doesn't mean violating trust, Officer Hayes. These kids already feel trapped enough as it is." Daniel hesitated, his jaw tightening slightly, but he didn't reply. Instead, he walked out, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. The first major clash came just 2 hours later. In room 214, Emily was teaching her sophomore English class when 2 school security officers and Officer Hayes entered the room. "Apologies for the interruption," Hayes said, holding a clipboard. "We're conducting a random search. Everyone step away from your desks." A wave of murmurs rippled through the classroom. Students exchanged nervous glances. Jake Miller, sitting in the back row, froze. He clutched his notebook tighter, his knuckles pale. Emily's voice cut through the silence. "This is unacceptable. These are my students. You can't just barge in here like this." Hayes kept his tone even. "We're following school policy, Miss Carter. Step aside, please." Jake's breathing quickened. When one of the security officers approached his desk, he pushed his chair back abruptly, knocking it over. The sudden noise startled the entire class. "Don't touch my stuff!" Jake shouted, his voice shaking. Several students gasped. The tension spiked instantly. Emily raised her hands, trying to calm him. "Jake, it's okay. No one's accusing you of anything. Just breathe, okay?" But Officer Hayes stepped forward. "Sir, I need you to stand up." Jake's chest rose and fell rapidly, panic flashing in his eyes. The officer's presence, the clipboard, the stares, it was too much. And that's when Emily did something she would later regret. She stepped between Jake and Officer Hayes. "You're not searching his bag," she said firmly. A thick silence filled the classroom. Students stared, wide-eyed, sensing that something irreversible was unfolding before them. Hayes lowered his voice. "Emily, don't do this." "I am doing this," she said, her voice unwavering. "You're crossing a line." A long, tense moment passed. Finally, Hayes exhaled, motioning for his officers to leave. But the damage was done. Word of the incident spread through the school like wildfire. By lunchtime, students were whispering about the teacher who defied the cops. Later that day, Emily was summoned to the principal's office. Michael Turner sat behind his polished mahogany desk, his hands clasped tightly. "Emily, what the hell were you thinking?" he demanded, his voice low but full of anger. "I was thinking about my students," she shot back. "Jake was terrified. They barged into my class like he was a criminal. That's not protecting kids, Michael. That's traumatizing them." Turner leaned forward. "Do you realize what you've done? Officer Hayes filed a report. The district's involved now. You've escalated this into something bigger than you can control." Emily crossed her arms. "Good. Maybe it's time someone started asking why we're turning schools into police zones." Turner's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The silence between them said more than words ever could. That night, as Emily drove home, she replayed the events in her mind. The fear in Jake's eyes, the heavy silence in her classroom, the way Hayes had looked at her, frustrated, conflicted, maybe even angry. But she didn't know that while she sat in her car, questioning her decisions, the seeds of something much larger were already taking root. Within 24 hours, the incident would explode beyond the walls of Riverside High. Parents would take sides. The media would arrive. Protests would begin. And the fragile line between safety and freedom would shatter completely. The sun rose over Dallas the next morning, but for Riverside High School, it didn't feel like a normal day. By the time Emily arrived in the parking lot, a cluster of reporters was already waiting outside the school gates, their cameras trained on the main entrance. A small crowd of parents had gathered, holding handwritten signs. Some demanded more protection for our kids, while others screamed, "Stop criminalizing students." Emily pulled her scarf tighter around her neck, lowering her gaze as she slipped past the cameras. She knew the video from her classroom had leaked, the one where she stood between Jake Miller and Officer Hayes, refusing to let the officers search his bag. Now the entire city had an opinion about her. Inside the school, whispers followed her everywhere. Students stared when she passed, their eyes wide as though they were watching someone walk a tightrope above a storm. In the teacher's lounge, the tension was suffocating. Lena Roberts was the first to speak, her voice low and urgent. "Emily, it's all over the news. Channel 8's calling this the Riverside Revolt. They're painting you as some kind of hero or a troublemaker. Depends on who you ask." Emily dropped into a chair, exhaustion etched into her face. "I'm not trying to be a hero. I just want these kids to feel safe in their own classrooms." Across the room, James Park, the history teacher, muttered sharply, "Well, congratulations. Now the entire district's under investigation because of you." Emily shot him a look. "Because of me? Or because the district decided to turn schools into police zones?" Before James could respond, the door opened and Principal Michael Turner stormed in, his face pale. "Emergency staff meeting. Now, library." The library was packed with teachers, officers, and administrators. At the front, a representative from the Dallas Independent School District stood beside Chief Raymond Collins from the police department. Chief Collins adjusted the microphone, his deep voice commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, yesterday's incident has put Riverside High at the center of a citywide debate. The district is under intense scrutiny, and from this moment forward, law enforcement will be working more closely with school staff to ensure safety." Emily raised her hand. "What does more closely mean exactly?" Collins's eyes swept the room before settling on her. "It means expanded authority for officers on campus. That includes searches, removals, and immediate lockdowns if necessary." A wave of murmurs filled the room. Emily's chest tightened. "Sir," she said steadily, "do you realize what this will do to our students? They're already scared. You're escalating things, not fixing them." Collins didn't flinch. "Miss Carter, I respect your position, but our priority is safety. One bad incident, one weapon, one violent altercation, and the consequences could be tragic." Lena whispered under her breath, "This is going to blow up." And she was right. 2 days later, the first lockdown happened. It started with a single rumor, a whispered warning in the cafeteria about a student carrying something dangerous. Within minutes, the loudspeakers blared, "No, code red, lockdown, this is not a drill." Classrooms went dark. Students crouched beneath desks. Teachers locked doors and silenced phones. Emily huddled near her students, her heart pounding as police boots thundered down the hallways. Outside her locked door, she could hear shouting officers barking orders, lockers slamming, students crying. In the corner, Jake Miller sat curled up, his notebook clutched to his chest. Emily placed a gentle hand on his shoulder, whispering, "It's okay. You're safe here." Minutes later, the door burst open. Officer Hayes entered, followed by 2 armed officers. "Everyone stay calm," he said firmly. "We're clearing the rooms." But when they reached Jake, everything unraveled again. One officer grabbed his bag, unzipping it before Emily could intervene. Inside, they found nothing. Just books, sketches, and a few crumpled assignments. Jake's eyes burned with humiliation as whispers filled the classroom. Hayes froze for a moment, realizing the mistake, but the damage was done. That night, videos from multiple students hit TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. Hashtags exploded. #Riverside Lockdown. #Protect Our Kids. #Justice for Jake. Within hours, Riverside High became a national headline. Talk shows debated the role of police in schools. Experts argued on live television. Parents were divided into two furious camps. Those demanding more protection, more officers, more authority, and those accusing the district of traumatizing kids and violating their rights. Through it all, Emily became the unintended face of the rebellion. 3 days later, a new video surfaced. It showed a different Texas school where police had tackled a teacher during a heated argument about student searches. The clip went viral, reigniting outrage and deepening mistrust between educators and law enforcement across the state. In the teacher's lounge, Lena slammed her phone on the table. "This isn't just about Riverside anymore. It's everywhere. And they're using your name, Emily. You're trending on Twitter." Emily rubbed her temples, exhaustion shadowing her face. "I never wanted this. I just wanted to teach." Lena leaned forward, whispering, "Emily, you started something bigger than you, and they're not going to back down." Outside the school, parents began protesting daily. Media vans lined the street. Chants echoed through megaphones. "Protect our kids, not our policies. Stop turning schools into prisons." Tensions boiled hotter by the hour. And in the middle of it all, Emily knew one thing for certain. This isn't about safety anymore. This is about control. She was right. Because behind the scenes, the district had already made a decision, one that would change everything. They were preparing for a full-scale police operation inside Riverside High. And when that day came, the line between authority and chaos would shatter. The morning of Friday, March 14th, dawned under heavy gray skies over Riverside High School. It felt as though the entire city of Dallas was holding its breath. By 7 a.m., the street outside the school was flooded. Hundreds of parents, students, and activists gathered with banners and megaphones. On one side, protesters demanded more police, more protection, fearful after weeks of rumors and lockdowns. On the other side, chants rose defiantly. "Stop traumatizing our kids. Schools are not prisons." Police barricades lined the sidewalks. News vans formed a wall of flashing lights. Helicopters circled above. Inside the school, the atmosphere was suffocating. Teachers whispered nervously as officers patrolled the hallways. Students exchanged anxious looks, clutching their phones, scrolling through TikTok live streams of the protests outside. And in the middle of it all stood Emily Carter. She leaned against the wall outside her classroom, her arms folded tightly, watching the chaos unfold through the glass doors. Every instinct told her something terrible was coming. 8:15 a.m. Emergency staff briefing. Principal Michael Turner gathered the teachers in the library, his voice strained but controlled. "Listen carefully," he said. "The district has approved a full-scale security operation today. Dallas PD and school security will be working together. There will be mandatory bag checks, random classroom sweeps, and an increased police presence in the cafeteria and hallways." Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. "You can't be serious, Michael. This place already feels like a war zone." Before Turner could respond, the heavy doors opened, and Chief Raymond Collins entered, flanked by a team of officers. His deep voice filled the room. "This isn't optional. We have credible reports of potential threats inside Riverside High. Our job is to ensure nothing and no one puts these students in danger." Emily's hand trembled slightly as she spoke, her voice low but steady. "Chief, do you even hear yourself? You're treating children like criminals. Do you know the message this sends?" Collins's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the loudspeakers crackled overhead. "Attention! This is an emergency safety protocol. All teachers remain in your classrooms. Officers will be conducting controlled searches. This is not a drill. The library fell silent. And the operation begins. Police officers spread through the hallways, their boots echoing against the polished floors. Students were lined up, their bags searched one by one. Some looked scared. Others looked angry. In room 214, Emily's class sat frozen, whispering nervously. She stood near the door, arms crossed, heart pounding as footsteps approached. And then, the door swung open. Officer Daniel Hayes stepped inside, his expression unreadable, followed by two other officers. The tension between him and Emily was palpable. The air seemed to thicken around them. "Emily," Hayes said softly, almost like a warning. "Step aside." Emily shook her head. "Not this time, Daniel. These are my students. You can't just barge in here like this." Hayes lowered his voice. "We have orders. Don't make this harder than it already is." Her reply was calm, but unyielding. "If you want to search this classroom, you'll have to go through me." For a moment, no one moved. The officers behind Hayes shifted uncomfortably, sensing the standoff. Students sat wide-eyed, holding their breath. And then chaos erupted. The trigger. Jake Miller. From the back of the room, Jake Miller suddenly stood up, his face pale, his body shaking. In his hand was a small black object, not a weapon, but a folded sketchbook. But one of the officers shouted instinctively, "Drop it, now!" The command sent the room spiraling into panic. Students screamed. Chairs scraped violently across the floor. Someone knocked over a desk. Emily rushed toward Jake, putting herself between him and the officers. "Stop! He's not dangerous. It's just a notebook." Jake's breathing was ragged, his wide eyes darting from Emily to the officers, trapped like an animal cornered. Officer Hayes hesitated, his hand hovering near his holster, torn between instinct and reason. "Daniel," Emily whispered urgently, "look at her. He's terrified, not violent." The silence was deafening. And then slowly Hayes lowered his hand. "Jake," he said softly, "give me the sketchbook." Jake blinked, his lip trembling, and finally handed it over. Hayes opened it and froze. Inside were dozens of drawings, dark, chaotic sketches of classrooms, broken windows, screaming faces, and shadows of police officers towering over students. Hayes glanced at Emily. Her face was pale, but she nodded slowly. "He's been trying to tell us something," she whispered. No one was listening. 10:30 a.m., breaking point. But before anyone could process what just happened, a sudden roar erupted outside the school. The protests had spiraled out of control. Two groups, parents demanding more police and parents demanding less, had clashed at the barricades. Chants turned into shouts. Shouts turned into shoving. Shoving turned into full chaos. Inside the school, the sound of sirens and yelling drifted through the hallways. Officers rushed past Emily's classroom, shouting into radios. Principal Turner's voice blasted through the intercom. "Full lockdown. Everyone stay in your rooms. Repeat, full lockdown." Emily crouched near her students, holding a trembling Jake by the shoulders, whispering, "It's okay. I've got you. No one's going to hurt you." But deep down, she knew things had gone too far. This wasn't just a school safety issue anymore. This was a battlefield. 11:45 a.m., a decision that changes everything. In the principal's office, Chief Collins faced a wall of TV screens, broadcasting the chaos outside. His jaw was tight, his knuckles white as gripped the edge of the desk. Hayes entered the room, his voice low and urgent. "Chief, we're making this worse. These kids are terrified. The teachers are furious. If we keep pushing, someone's going to get hurt." Collins didn't answer at first. Then after a long pause, he said, "Pull back." Hayes blinked. "Sir?" "I said pull back. Withdraw the officers. Now." Within minutes, the command rippled through the hallways. Officers lowered their weapons. Students breathed shaky sighs of relief. Emily's classroom door remained locked, but she felt the tension finally slightly ease. Outside, though, the protest raged on. But Emily knew this wasn't the end. This was only the beginning. Because Riverside High had just become ground zero for a national conversation about safety, freedom, and the role of authority in schools. And soon, another incident would ignite an even bigger fire. Saturday, March the 15th, the morning after, the sun rose over Dallas, but the city was far from calm. The events at Riverside High School had exploded into a national headline overnight. Every news network replayed the shaky cell phone videos of police storming classrooms and students screaming. Social media erupted with hashtags like #Riverside High, #Police in Schools, #Justice, for Jake. Emily Carter woke up to hundreds of notifications on her phone, emails from journalists, messages from parents, threats from strangers, support from thousands. But none of it mattered compared to the moment she clicked on a video that was already trending, a TikTok clip recorded by one of her own students. The video showed the Officer Hayes entering her classroom. It captured Emily standing between him and Jake. It showed Jake holding his sketchbook, shaking, his terrified face frozen forever in millions of feeds. And then, the part that set the internet on fire. Emily's words caught clearly on the video. "If you want to search this classroom, you'll have to go through me." The clip had 5.7 million views by the time she finished watching. 1 p.m. Dallas City Hall press conference. By afternoon, the mayor of Dallas, Rachel Sandoval, addressed the press. Flanked by Chief Raymond Collins and Superintendent Laura Bennett, she struggled to control the narrative. "This was an isolated safety operation conducted to protect students," she said firmly. "There was no evidence of weapons and no student was harmed. However, we acknowledge the distress caused and will conduct a full independent review." Reporters shouted questions. "Mayor, why were police officers authorized to storm classrooms without warrants?" "Chief Collins, did your officers draw weapons on a 15-year-old boy?" "Superintendent Bennett, are teachers being silenced?" Collins answered in his usual clipped tone, "My officers acted according to protocol. Any claims suggesting misconduct are under investigation." But behind the podium, Collins's jaw was tight. He knew the storm had only just begun. 3:15 p.m. The lawsuit threats begin. By late afternoon, the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, announced it was investigating Riverside High. Parent groups filed formal complaints against the school district. 3 teachers announced plans to sue the Dallas Police Department for violating student rights. And at the center of it all was Emily Carter. Her phone rang nonstop. News anchors wanted interviews. Advocacy groups wanted her to testify. Talk shows labeled her either a hero or a troublemaker. But Emily didn't want fame. She wanted answers, especially for Jake Miller. 6 p.m. Jake's silence. Jake hadn't spoken a word since the incident. His mother, Linda Miller, sat with him on the living room couch, holding his trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. Emily visited them that evening, walking carefully into the quiet, dimly lit house. "Hi, Jake," she whispered softly, sitting on the edge of the couch. "It's me, Miss Carter." Jake's eyes flickered toward her, but didn't meet her gaze. His sketchbook sat on the coffee table, closed tightly. Linda's voice cracked as she spoke. "He barely eats, barely sleeps. Every time he hears a siren, he jumps." Emily squeezed Jake's hand gently. "You're safe now," she said. "I promise." but deep down she wasn't sure if that promise was true anymore. Monday, March 17th, the turning point. 3 days later, things took a darker turn. A leaked email surfaced from Chief Collins' office, revealing that the Dallas Police Department had prior knowledge of a potential incident involving Jake weeks before the raid. The email, marked confidential, suggested that Jake's name had been flagged after he posted disturbing sketches online, leading to increased surveillance at Riverside High. The public backlash was instant and ferocious. Why was Jake being monitored? Why weren't his parents informed? And why had no counselor been assigned before things escalated to a full police invasion? Tuesday, March 18th. Hayes breaks the silence. That night, Officer Daniel Hayes finally spoke out. In an exclusive interview with a local station, he revealed, "We were given limited information. We were told there was a credible threat and instructed to follow orders. But looking back, I believe we handled it wrong. We scared those kids. We scared Jake. And for that, I'm sorry." His words went viral. Supporters praised him for speaking out. Chief Collins, however, suspended him without pay. The divide within the department deepened. March 20th. Emily receives a warning. Late at night, Emily sat grading papers when her phone buzzed. An unknown number sent her a single message. "Stop talking, or you'll regret it." Her stomach dropped. Before she could process it, a second message came through. "This goes deeper than you think." Emily's hands trembled as she locked her door and called Hayes. "Daniel, something's wrong. I think they're trying to silence me." Hayes's voice was tense on the other end. "Don't stay at your apartment tonight. I'll come get you." Emily didn't know it yet, but she was stepping into something far more dangerous than a school safety scandal. March 21st. The anonymous package. The next morning, a plain brown envelope arrived at Emily's doorstep. Inside was a USB drive and a note written in block letters. "Watch this. Tell no one." She plugged it into her laptop, hesitating for a moment as the screen flickered. The video began playing. Grainy surveillance footage. A dimly lit conference room. 4 men in suits seated around a table. One voice, deep, commanding, said, "Lock down the schools. Create panic. The budget vote's coming up. If we want more funding for law enforcement, we need fear." Emily froze. This wasn't about Jake. This wasn't about safety. This was about money and control. The storm before the collapse. By the end of the week, Riverside High had become ground zero for a political war. Parents were pulling their kids out of the school. Teachers were threatening a mass strike. Protesters camped outside Dallas City Hall day and night. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Emily Carter, Daniel Hayes, and Jake Miller were trapped in a web they never saw coming, one where every step forward brought them closer to danger. Because someone powerful didn't want the truth to come out, and they were willing to do whatever it takes to bury it. Friday, March 28th, 10:45 p.m., the city of Dallas slept uneasily. Streetlights bathed Riverside High in a pale orange glow, but the school itself was empty and silent, at least it seemed that way. Inside the dimly lit library, Emily Carter sat with Officer Daniel Hayes, Jake Miller, and Jake's mother, Linda. A laptop rested on the table between them, the USB drive still plugged in. The video from the anonymous package had already played 6 times. Each replay made the reality sink deeper. This wasn't just a school safety operation gone wrong. It was a deliberate plan. Chief Raymond Collins wasn't acting on his own. There were powerful figures above him, city officials, lobbyists, and private security companies manipulating fear to push for a billion-dollar funding deal that would privatize school security across Texas. Emily leaned back in her chair, her voice hoarse from hours of arguing. "If this gets out, it's over for them. Collins, the mayor, everyone." Hayes shook his head grimly. "If this gets out," he said softly, "it's over for us first." Saturday, March 29th, 2:15 a.m. The sound of a car door slamming outside broke the silence. Hayes jumped to his feet, gun drawn, peering through the blinds. A black SUV sat across the street, its headlights off, engine idling. Emily's heart pounded. "Daniel, who's that?" Hayes's jaw tightened. "They found us." Within seconds, he shut the laptop, grabbed the USB, and motioned to Linda and Jake. "Go, now." As they slipped out the back door, the front porch lit up with harsh white beams from tactical flashlights. And then, the glass shattered. A figure in black burst through the living room window, boots crunching against shards of glass. Hayes shoved Emily toward the hallway. "Run!" Gunshots echoed in the night. Sunday, March 30th. Safe house. By dawn, they were hiding inside an abandoned motel on the outskirts of Dallas. The room smelled of dust and mold. The walls were thin, the locks weak, but for now, it was safety. Jake sat curled up on the bed, hugging his sketchbook, while Emily paced the room, her mind racing. "This isn't just about Riverside anymore," she whispered. "This is bigger than the school, bigger than Dallas." Hayes leaned against the wall, loading his weapon. "They want that USB back. If they find us before we expose this, we disappear." Emily stopped pacing, her eyes fixed on him. "Then we don't wait for them to find us. We go public. We go live." Hayes stared at her for a long moment. "That'll put a target on your back." Emily's voice was steady. "There's already one there." Monday, March 31st. Going live. At exactly 7 p.m., Emily, Hayes, and Jake went live on YouTube from a secure, encrypted location. Within minutes, hundreds of thousands of viewers tuned in. Emily sat in front of the camera, pale but resolute, holding the USB drive in her hand. "My name is Emily Carter," she began, her voice shaking slightly but growing steadier with each word. "I'm a teacher at Riverside High. A week ago, police stormed my classroom. They claimed it was for safety. That was a lie." She uploaded the video from the USB live on screen, the meeting between city officials, the manipulation, the plan to weaponize fear for profit. The chat exploded instantly. Comments flooded in. "This is insane. Expose them all. Emily, stay safe. They're coming for you." Within 12 minutes, the stream crossed 3.2 million views. Monday, March 31st, 7:18 p.m. That's when the feed cut out. Static filled the screen. A deep, distorted voice came through the speakers. "You were warned." And then black. Emily's chest tightened as she stared at the blank laptop screen. Hayes cursed under his breath, yanking the power cord out and slamming the laptop shut. "They've traced us. We need to move, now." Before they could react, the distant hum of engines grew louder. Through the cracked blinds, 3 SUVs appeared, closing in fast. Emily grabbed Jake's hand. "Stay behind me. Don't let go." Hayes cocked his weapon and positioned himself by the door. "This is it," he whispered. "No more running." Tuesday, April 1st. The warehouse showdown. An hour later, the chase ended inside an abandoned steel warehouse by the Trinity River. Emily, Hayes, and Jake were cornered, trapped among stacks of rusting machinery and broken crates. From the shadows, Chief Collins emerged, flanked by masked men in tactical gear. Collins's face was pale but furious. "You should have kept quiet, Emily," he said, his voice cold and sharp. "You think you're saving these kids? You're destroying everything." Emily stepped forward, her voice trembling but firm. "The truth destroys lies, Collins. That's all we're doing." Collins raised his hand, signaling his men forward. But before they could move, sirens blared outside the warehouse. A swarm of FBI agents flooded the building, weapons raised, voices booming. "Federal agents, drop your weapons." Collins froze. His men hesitated. Hayes didn't. In one swift motion, he tackled Collins to the ground, slamming his gun out of reach. Chaos erupted as agents stormed in, forcing the masked men to surrender. Tuesday, April 1st, 11:47 p.m. By the time the dust settled, Collins was in handcuffs along with 3 city officials and 2 private security executives. The FBI seized the USB drive. Emily, Hayes, and Jake were escorted to safety. For the first time in weeks, silence. But even as she sat in the back of the armored SUV, Emily stared out the window at the city lights, her chest tight with unease. Because she knew this wasn't over. Yes, Collins had fallen. Yes, the conspiracy had been exposed. But somewhere, above even him, bigger players were still pulling strings. And they wouldn't stop until Riverside High and everyone connected to it was silenced for good. Friday, April 4th, 9 a.m. The sun shone brightly over Dallas, but for Emily Carter, the world still felt heavy and cold. It had been 3 days since the FBI raid that exposed Chief Collins and his inner circle. 3 days since the media declared Emily a hero teacher and Hayes a whistleblower cop. And yet, despite the arrests, the viral videos, and the wall-to-wall coverage, something felt wrong. 10:12 a.m., the call that changed everything. Emily sat in her small apartment, sipping coffee, when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A low, gravelly voice whispered on the other end. "You think this is over? Collins was a pawn. We're still here, and we're watching." The line went dead. Emily's hands trembled as she stared at her phone. A chill ran through her spine. They weren't finished. Saturday, April 5th. Hayes' discovery. Meanwhile, Officer Daniel Hayes sat in his car outside the Dallas Police Department, scrolling through a confidential FBI report he'd managed to access through an old contact. The document confirmed his worst fear. Collins had been working under a private security conglomerate called Sentinel Dynamics, a multi-billion-dollar company lobbying for nationwide school security contracts. And the plan? Stage small-scale panic events at schools across the country to scare parents, manipulate the media, and force Congress into approving federal funding. Hayes exhaled sharply, muttering to himself, "Jesus Christ, Riverside was just the beginning." Sunday, April 6th. Jake breaks his silence. Jake Miller hadn't spoken in 2 weeks. But that morning, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, his sketchbook open in front of him, he finally looked up at his mother and Emily. "They're coming back," he whispered. Emily froze. "Jake, what do you mean?" He flipped to a page in his sketchbook. A charcoal drawing showed 3 black SUVs parked outside Riverside High. Dark figures standing in the shadows. "I saw them," he said softly, tears filling his eyes. "Last night, across the street from our house." Emily's chest tightened. Sentinel Dynamics wasn't backing off. Monday, April 7th. The trap. That night, Emily, Hayes, and Jake met secretly in a small safe house owned by an FBI liaison who believed their story. But when Hayes stepped outside to make a call, he noticed something unusual, a tiny blinking red light under the safe house porch. A tracker. "Damn it," he muttered, rushing back inside. "They found us. We need to move now." Before they could react, headlights flooded the windows. Engines roared outside. The sound of boots on gravel echoed like thunder. Emily grabbed Jake, pulling him close, her voice barely a whisper. "Stay behind me, no matter what." Hayes drew his weapon, positioning himself by the door. And then the power went out. The room plunged into darkness. Monday, April 7th, 9:37 p.m. The first flashbang exploded through the window, filling the room with blinding light and smoke. Shadows moved rapidly outside. Hayes fired a warning shot, shouting, "Federal protection! Stand down!" But these weren't police. These were private contractors, hired mercenaries working for Sentinel Dynamics. Within seconds, the door splintered under the weight of a steel battering ram. Emily screamed as a masked figure lunged toward Jake. Hayes tackled the man, wrestling him to the ground. Another figure grabbed Emily by the arm, yanking her toward the hallway, but she kicked free, shoving him into a broken chair. Gunfire erupted outside the safe house. FBI backup had arrived. The firefight lasted less than 4 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When it was over, 3 mercenaries lay restrained, and the rest had fled into the night. Tuesday, April 8th, the whistleblower. The next morning, the FBI called Emily and Hayes into a secured facility. There, they were introduced to a man in a gray suit with dark sunken eyes. "My name is Richard Voss," he said. "I used to work for Sentinel Dynamics, and you're not safe." Voss slid a folder across the table. Inside were classified contracts, emails, and memos revealing Sentinel's master plan, a nationwide operation codenamed Project Lockstep. Plans to stage crises in 200-plus schools, a media strategy to control the narrative, direct ties to members of Congress. Emily stared at the documents, her voice breaking. "They're turning our schools into battlegrounds, just to make money." Voss nodded grimly. "And they're not stopping. They have political protection at the highest levels." Thursday, April 10th. The final broadcast. That night, Emily, Hayes, and Voss recorded one last encrypted live stream. Emily sat in front of the camera, her face pale but determined. She held up the classified files, speaking directly to millions watching worldwide. "My name is Emily Carter. If you're seeing this, you need to understand something. Riverside High wasn't an accident. It was a test. Sentinel Dynamics has plans to take this nationwide, and they will succeed unless we stop them." She uploaded every file: live contracts, videos, whistleblower testimonies. For 14 minutes, the world watched in stunned silence. And then, the stream cut off. Friday, April 11th. The disappearance. The next morning, Emily, Hayes, and Jake were gone. Their safe house was empty. Their phones were dead. Their cars abandoned. The FBI claimed they had been relocated for protection. But online forums told a different story. Some claimed Emily and Hayes were kidnapped. Others believed they went underground to continue fighting Sentinel Dynamics from the shadows. No one knew the truth. Until 3 weeks later, a grainy cell phone video surfaced on the dark web. It showed Emily, Hayes, and Jake standing in a desert somewhere in Arizona. Emily looked directly into the camera, her expression calm but resolute. Her last recorded words: "They can erase us, but they can't erase the truth." And then the video went black. The end, or the beginning. The Riverside High scandal changed America forever. Multiple lawsuits flooded the courts. Sentinel Dynamics denied involvement, but Congress opened a federal investigation. Schools across the country demanded answers. But the deeper investigators dug, the more they realized Emily was right. Riverside wasn't the story. It was just the first chapter. Because Project Lockstep wasn't shut down. It had only moved underground. And the next target was already chosen.